Hi, and welcome to today's Engaging for Missouri webinar. With each of these 30-minute presentations, we intend to share research-based insights that leaders like you can apply in your own work to benefit and strengthen the state's agriculture and food system, hospitality sector, economy, communities, and families. I'm Alice Roach from the University of Missouri, and today Bill McKelvey from the MU Interdisciplinary Center for Food Security and Lexi Joes from the Missouri Department of Agriculture will join me in sharing a presentation titled Clearing the Path for Marketing Directly from Missouri Farms to Institutions. Before we begin, I do want to share a few housekeeping items. First, we'll close today with a Q&A session. Those of you who connected today via your computer may submit your questions in the chat screen. If you joined today by phone, then you may email questions to roacham@missouri.edu. If you encounter any technical problems today, then you can let us know by submitting a comment in the chat screen, or you can send an email to roacham@missouri.edu. And last, we will make a recording of today's presentation available. You can look for that recording from Zoom sometime tomorrow. So now I want to transition into the content of today's presentation, and I'm happy to have an opportunity to share with you about a farm to institution research project that we just recently completed in June of 2022. I do want to thank the Missouri Agricultural and Small Business Development Authority for providing the funding for the project. The project team members were Jill Moreland, Joe Parcell, Bill McKelvey, Hannah Anderson, and myself. And as a team, we really wanted this project to focus on two overall purposes. One, we wanted to evaluate the current situation for farms selling food products to institutions. And secondarily, we wanted to identify possible pathways for Missouri to consider to increase farm to institution activity in the state. So stemming from those overall project purposes or objectives, we did conduct several forms of research. In terms of primary research, we conducted a survey with producers to understand their perceptions about farm to institution participation. We also conducted interviews with 15 different stakeholders in the state to get their insights. Stakeholders could be institutional contacts, businesses that connect farms and institutions, or other allied individuals and organizations that have invested in farm to institution. In addition to that primary research, we conducted secondary research to understand what types of efforts or programs or initiatives other states have implemented to encourage farm to institution activity. So we looked for the most effective and novel programs other states have implemented, and we summarized those by state. And then in a few instances, we thought that there were effective models that we learned about from other states, and we described those models in a different chapter of our research report. The last portion of the project was exploring some farm to food bank pathways, and Bill McKelvey will speak more about that research here in a moment. In addition to the research itself, we did create 5 audio stories, which are basically audio-based case studies that feature different farm to institution efforts underway here in Missouri. So the hope is that those audio stories can build awareness of different farm to institution efforts, potentially create some partnerships, and also continue some momentum for farm to institution. We published all of the research, the audio stories, plus an overall project summary and series of research-based recommendations online. You can access all of the project materials at the short link that you see here on the screen. That's mizzou.us/farm institution. I do want to just give some overall highlights from the producer survey so you can kind of get an understanding of the types of questions that we asked producers in that survey. We did collect data from 28 different respondents, and we segmented those respondents into 3 groups based on their previous experience with farm to institution sales. So the non-adopters were individuals who had never sold food to institutions, and they were about 2/3 of our total respondents. Adopters were about 3 in 10 of our respondents, and adopters were those that sold food to institutions in 2019, 2020, or 2019 and 2020. And then the abandoners were the smallest group of our respondents. They had sold food products to institutions at some point in the past, but not in 2019 or 2020. If you go online and look at the full project report, you can see how we segmented responses to the survey by these 3 groups. But in some cases, we did also combine the responses to get a look at overall sentiment for specific questions. So I'll share some of those overall findings here. In one case, we were interested in knowing whether farms had interest in selling food products to institutions in the future. And a little more than 3/4 of those producers did suggest that they were interested in farm to institution sales in the future. We asked then what specific institutions these farms had the greatest interest in reaching. And in the next 3 years, the top 3 institutions that farms said that they were interested in reaching were schools, colleges or universities, and workplace cafeterias. We also wanted to know what would be the top motivators for farms to either begin selling to institutions or increase their sales to institutions. And those top 2 motivators were opportunities to network with institutions and funding to purchase post-harvest supplies. I did briefly mention earlier that we did create a series of research-based recommendations that build on the work that we did in this project. And then we did create several strategies for Missouri to consider as we work to increase farm to institution activity. So I'll kind of introduce those 4 recommendations here and give you a sampling of the strategies that we developed. You can go online, and in the full project report, we have a full list of the strategies that we developed. So the first recommendation is to facilitate connections between farms and institutions. If you recall from the producer survey, the top motivating factor to either sell more food to institutions or begin selling food to institutions was opportunities to network. When we did the stakeholder interviews, we heard similar sentiments. So in some cases, institutions don't even know where to begin in terms of finding farms that are interested in working with them. So a possible strategy is to create a supplier directory that allows those 2 parties to connect. The second recommendation is to support farm to institution procurement and programming. So one possible strategy that's related to this recommendation is to consider different formats for farm to institution procurement. When we think farm to institution sales, you might think automatically that you're talking about a farm selling to the food service function of an institution on a daily or weekly basis. And that certainly is one pathway, but there are also some different formats to consider. For example, if a producer is not growing at a scale that's required to meet the demand for a particular institution on a regular basis, maybe that producer will sell to an institution once a month, and the institution can feature a locally source dish on its menu. So that would be one format. Another option would be to set up mini farmers markets at institutions to either serve the clients of institutions or the employees. In both cases, those are other formats that allow farms to get some experience and an introduction to institutions, and they can grow that relationship over time. The third recommendation is to fill the gap in local food preparation, and this stems from 2 insights that we collected in our research. The first is that anytime a producer produces some sort of raw material, that raw material does need to have some value added to it in order for institutions to use that particular product on menus. And so someone needs to be responsible for that value addition. Additionally, we have some seasonality limitations here in the state because in some cases we have peak production of food products at a time where we don't necessarily see peak demand from institutions. If you think about schools, colleges, or universities, typically the school year will run from August to May, but that's not necessarily a time when we do see peak production of some products. And so we have to address that seasonality. And so by preparing foods so they're usable for institutions and by preserving foods, that could be an opportunity to make local product available for a longer portion of the year. So a couple strategies related to this recommendation would be to invest in food service training and resources. This assumes that the food service function of an institution takes responsibility for that value addition, but maybe the staff needs some training or needs some resources like infrastructure. If you're wanting to freeze food, for example, do you have enough freezer storage space in order to store that product until you're able to use it later on in the year? Another alternative is to make centralized preparation facilities available to producers. So this assumes that the producer internalizes that food preparation function. And with a centralized preparation facility, it's not the producer that would need to put up that upfront investment to create a facility. They could instead share a facility with other producers. And then the fourth recommendation is to re-engage following the pandemic. In several cases, our interviews with stakeholders found that there was some momentum with farm to institution before the pandemic, but the pandemic put a halt to some of those efforts. So now I think there is an opportunity to re-engage, and one possible strategy to do that is to add some sort of a mentoring component to farm to institution efforts. When we did our secondary research and learned what other states were doing, several had implemented farm to institution training type programs or institutes to where a institution would be partnered or paired with a coach or a mentor, and that coach or mentor would work with the institution to think about how to create a farm to institution plan and then implement it. So that's an option for Missouri to consider. So now I want to transition to Bill McKelvey, and he can speak more about the farm to food bank research that we conducted for this project.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Alice. I appreciate this opportunity. I'm going to delve into some findings that resulted from the survey we did with producers, and also some key informant interviews that were conducted as well. So to begin, I wanted to talk about some of the survey results that we found when we asked specifically about donating to hunger relief efforts. So first, we found that 3/4 of adopters, so those who were already doing farm to institution, had done some type of donating in the past. We also found that 2/3 of non-adopters and 100% of abandoners had done some donating as well. Most commonly, donations were made to food banks, food pantries, and other types of hunger relief organizations. Some donations were made to schools, or with the aid of a gleaning organization, or via a farm co-op. So we see that there are different ways to donate. In terms of what was donated, the types of products, primarily that was meat, poultry, eggs, vegetables, and fruit. When we asked producers about their reasons for donating, we found that most importantly, they did so to contribute to the local food system and their community. But additionally, they were interested in contributing to hunger relief efforts, to move unsold products, and to reduce food waste, and also for the tax benefit purposes. Factors that would encourage donations among producers. Most importantly, they noted expanded tax incentives. Also, having information about existing tax incentives, having help with harvesting, help with transportation, also help with packaging. And it was also noted that it could be helpful to be able to make donations through a distributor. We did some key informant interviews with stakeholders across the farm to food bank food system. So we talked to organizations, we talked to producers, and we came away with some recommendations. And so these recommendations really pertain to either sales or donations to hunger relief organizations. So we wanted to be inclusive of really all of the opportunities that are available. So there was a mention of creating and funding ongoing programs, or this idea that there are programs in Missouri and across the country that can help. And it was noted that these types of programs could be bolstered or created in Missouri, and that they would make a difference. Paying producers for product. So even if a producer were paid at below market cost for a donation, it was noted that that payment would be very helpful, both in terms of encouraging more donations or more sales, and also ensuring that producers receive some type of compensation for their time. Designating a coordinator at hunger relief agencies. So logistics are obviously a huge issue within this whole area. Raising awareness among producers. It was noted that producers may not know that there is an opportunity to sell or donate to hunger relief. Also, picking up product from farms. This idea that producers have plenty going on during the growing season, and if there were a way to help with transportation, it would greatly facilitate this opportunity. A few other recommendations from these key informant interviews. Growing Missouri's fruit and vegetable industry, including supporting food hubs, repacking facilities, and things like that. Partnering with intermediaries to utilize existing infrastructure. We know that transportation networks already exist. There's cold storage out there, possibly processing. So how can those existing infrastructure pieces be utilized to facilitate this? Focusing on building relationships. Relationships are so key to this whole endeavor. Also utilizing Missouri's strategic advantages. So where there are parts of the state where Missouri has advantages, whether it be livestock or vegetable production, thinking about ways to key in on those advantages to make the most of this opportunity. And with that, I will turn it over to Lexi Jose with the Missouri Department of Agriculture.
All right, thank you, Bill. Hi, everyone. My name is Lexi. I'm with the Missouri Department of Agriculture, and I'm here to talk about farm-to-school opportunities within the state of Missouri. And when I mention farm-to-school, that really covers early care, so from birth all the way up through college or past that, whatever schooling you want to have after that. So I'm with the Missouri Grown program, and our main goal with the Missouri Grown is connecting producers to consumers and consumers to agriculture. We have a website listed there, and that is really a big database that we have of agriculture-related businesses within the state who are wanting to connect with consumers. So this is a great site to go to. If you're searching for something specific, you can type that in within your region and find farmers that are in your area, or you can just reach out to one of us within the program. This is what we do on a daily basis. Missouri Grown is within the Missouri Department of Agriculture, and we are the state branded marketing team. And we do oversee multiple funding opportunities for farmers as well, and I have them listed there. So specifically, we're going to jump into farm to school opportunities that we have. So we have a Bringing the Farm to School producer training, and the goal of this training is to help agriculture producers build their capacity to launch or expand efforts to market to schools, therefore supporting producers in diversifying their business while increasing farm-to-school activity in schools and communities within Missouri. The objectives of the training is to increase producers' knowledge and understanding of farm-to-school programs, increase the participation in farm-to-school activities, and then increase the amount of local foods that producers sell to schools if they're already selling. And so we plan, along with the Department of Health and Senior Services, we are planning to offer this training, hopefully a one-day training this winter of 22 or 23. And then moving on to another opportunity, this is a funding opportunity currently through the Missouri Grown program. It's called Promoting Specialty Crops in Missouri Schools and Early Care Centers. So we are providing $1,000 reimbursement to early care sites or schools for the purchase of a specialty crop from a Missouri farmer between April 1st of 2022 and November 1st of 2023. This is a reimbursement, so the schools do have to purchase upfront and then submit their application and do a survey with the students and submit that to be reimbursed. It does aim to increase the consumption and knowledge of specialty crops. So it's only for specialty crops that can be consumed. And then each school is required to complete an educational activity about the specialty crop production, just to increase the knowledge portion of our objectives for this funding. And I did include the link here, and I think you all will receive this information after the training. And then October is National Farm to School Month, so October is coming up here. We do like to celebrate Farm to School Month with schools, businesses, and just for people to take a bite into local produce. And what we call it is the Crunch Off. It is a competition between the Mountain Plains regions per the USDA, and Missouri has participated since 2020, and Nebraska always wins. So we are registering people now if you want to participate to crunch in just local food and celebrate our farmers and local produce. Just let me know, but also the registration link is here if you do want to sign up And it doesn't just have to be a school. It can be any type of business, or like the Department of Ag does a big crunch off, Department of Health, any organization that it wants to celebrate local food can participate. All right, and then with that at the state level, we also have the Growing with Mo Harvest of the Season with the Department of Health and Senior Services. And this is Missouri's Farm to ECE, so it's birth to 5 years old program that offers resources and trainings for early care and education settings. The goal of this program is to educate children and the adults in their lives about local foods, especially fresh fruits and vegetables. The Growing with Mo toolkit highlights the following strategies. So they integrate Farm to EC in the classroom. They integrate field trips, gardening with the young children, and then of course taste testing to try out those local foods. There is the website, and there's also an email address if anybody's interested. They do Growing with Mo. They also do the Go Knapsack program and a lot of other great opportunities for our youngest eaters in our state through that program. And lastly here, so Missouri did do a big strategic planning process with the USDA for Farm to School. Out of our Mountain Plains region, Missouri is probably one of the more lacking states for Farm to School. So we did this strategic planning session. We held a visioning meeting that was virtual. We did a root cause analysis that was virtual, and we did come up with 6 root causes of Farm to School and ECE barriers that people are seeing within our state. And then after that, we did travel around the state to 6 regional in-person meetings for a solutions meeting. And we did have a really good attendance, a little bit over 150 attendees. And the solutions that I wanted to point out, this is still all being reviewed by the USDA, and hopefully we'll have a final report sometime. I'm guessing now by September, we'll have a report from the USDA. But some of the things that really came up for the solutions was to have a website or a person that oversees all of the Farm to School activities and information, because right now it is just split up between a bunch of different state agencies. So it's really hard to find all Farm to School information. Also, there's a lot of misconception about what Farm to School is and who regulates what for Farm to School. So having a clear guide of some sort, it was a big solution that we heard from everybody. Again, a Farm to School state lead person who works specifically on connecting those farmers and those schools together for those purchases. And then just connecting schools who are doing the Farm to School, kind of like the mentoringship that was brought up earlier. The USDA will give us an action plan once all this information is compiled, and then hope to get that again in September of 2022 to help guide where Missouri can go to increase our Farm to School efforts.
Well, thank you, Lexi and Bill, for presenting. If you could both turn back on your microphones and your video, we have time to take a few questions. So audience members, if you do have a question, please go ahead and submit that in the chat screen, or you can also send me an email at roacham@missouri.edu. Bill, to get the conversation started, you covered quite a few recommendations to support farm to food bank efforts. And one of those was to think about ways to partner with intermediaries to offer or utilize existing infrastructure. Can you give some examples of what you mean by that and how that may take shape?
Well, I think primarily I was referring to, ideas that would make use of cold storage, logistics, repacking facilities. Most of the regional food banks in Missouri have some rather large capacity cold storage. So there could be opportunities to utilize cold storage at regional food banks to facilitate this. Likewise, some local community-based food pantries as well have some pretty adequate cold storage. Obviously, folks would have to kind of dive into the details and see what was possible there, but that infrastructure does exist.
Excellent, thank you. And Lexi, you mentioned the Promoting Specialty Crops in Missouri Schools and ECEs program, which provides the reimbursement for schools and ECEs that want to implement farm to school efforts. Could you give a summary of kind of the status of that program? Are funds available until they're all fully expended, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the funds, we did have a set amount of funding. So we received $50,000 from the Specialty Crop Block Grant, and we are opening up until that is exhausted. Currently, I have only had about 3 people apply for the funding. So we still have quite a bit of funding left. It's been promoted pretty well. So I have a lot of people interested. It's just, I think, like you mentioned earlier, the growing season and when school is in session. So it's really targeting, for the most part, it seems like our early care centers are the ones taking advantage of the funding at this time.
Excellent, thank you. We do have an attendee question here about, we had 28 producers in our survey, and do we have more details about these producers and whether they're representative of the entire population? I would not say that they're representative of the entire population of Missouri producers. When we did sample for this survey, we attempted to reach out to a lot of different types of Missouri producers, but we focused a lot of our efforts on farms that had interest in more value-added type operations. We recruited respondents at an agritourism conference, for example. And so the full report does include more information about some of the demographics of these farms, so you can get to know a little bit more about the farms that did participate. Bill, I want to go back to you for another question. You spoke with several hunger relief organizations to get their views about accepting donations from farms. So what did they view as some of the greatest hurdles to accepting such donations?
A couple of things came up. One was simply making connections with producers. And so, that's kind of really the foundation of kind of getting the conversation started. From there, kind of working out logistics, for example. So helping to, find ways to make use of products and kind of get those into the hunger relief system in general. And then I think also working out scale issues. So some producers produce a lot and would perhaps produce enough in order to kind of satisfy the needs of a regional food bank that deals in a lot of product in general. Other producers who may be smaller and producing smaller quantities of product, may be more appropriate for them to go straight to a local community-based food pantry. So it requires really kind of delving into some of those details to see how much can be produced, how can it be transported, where is the sort of best location for kind of sending that donation, or perhaps even a product that is purchased.
Yeah, thank you. And Lexi, I have one last question for you. We have this crunch off coming up in October. So where can Missourians go to find more information, and what ideas do you have to increase participation this year? So maybe we can compete with Nebraska, that always tends to win.
Yeah, that is a good question. So we are just now creating the flyer with the registration links, and then the Department of Health and Senior Services actually on that Growing with Mo page is creating a Missouri Crunch Off button. And that's where we're going to try to house most of our information on there. It is still a work in progress, but most of the time we're just sending out flyers that include the registration links. And then it's Lisa Lauer with the Department of Health and Senior Services and myself that are kind of co-leading the efforts here to increase participation. And really, our strategy this year is we are promoting it on everything. So social media, doing webinars like this. We are getting tons of inquiries, especially after the USDA regional meetings. And so just really the promotion and sharing within the networks is really our strategy for hoping to beat Nebraska or get close to Nebraska for 2022.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Lexi and Bill, for presenting today. It's time to go ahead and close today's presentation. Thank you to our audience for joining us. A post-webinar survey will either have already loaded in your browser or it will load soon after you close Zoom. Please consider responding to that survey as we'll use the results to improve the webinar experience and also brainstorm future webinar topics. Again, you should receive a recorded copy of today's presentations plus the presentation slides via email sometime tomorrow. You can join our next Engaging for Missouri webinar on September 14th. Agricultural economist Scott Brown will share a presentation titled, "Will Food Price Inflation Slow in Late 2022?" Again, thanks so much for joining us, and I hope you have a great Wednesday.